Big Pharma's $263 million lobbying efforts are getting the industry a $450 billion break thanks to Democrats' drug pricing plan. According to a new tax return obtained by the Daily Poster, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America donated another $2.7 million in 2020 to Center Forward, a dark money group that spent at least $1.2 million touting Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona.
This news comes as the U.S. drug epidemic reaches another tragic milestone, more than 100,000 overdose deaths in the last year. It's the first time that drug-related deaths reached six figures in any 12-month period. Here to expand on all of this is Daily Poster reporter Julia Rock. Julia, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, when we're looking at the really tragic overdose numbers from last year, how much do you think can that be blamed on the pandemic, or is it other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the number you're raising is just sort of another example of what bad actors these pharmaceutical companies are. And we see that, in the price gouging of insulin, in the overdose epidemic. And, I think, obviously all of these factors are coming together to make that number so high this year. But I think what really stands out to me is that it's just another way in which we can see what bad actors these drug companies are.
Yeah, and what do is the American, we're paying more attention to overdose deaths, I think, but I still don't see it discussed very much in the mainstream media. Certainly not the connection between, what drug companies are doing. To some degree, drug companies are being lionized for being the heroes of the pandemic, for coming up with things we need, life-saving things, et cetera. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I think the flip side of this, is another thing that's happening right now is some of the same companies and some different companies are price gouging the, life-saving drugs, Narcan, and the treatment drug Suboxone. And, if we take it back to the Democrats' drug pricing negotiation, a lot of these are drugs that have already been developed, in many cases with government investments, and now are just out of reach, too expensive to save people's lives. So, I think it's also important to look at the flip side of this and the drugs that, could be helping to tackle the overdose epidemic that people can't afford or don't have access to.
And can you talk a little bit about the lobbying effort that we alluded to earlier and what Big Pharma is getting out of this package? Because there is some negotiation that is going to be allowed as a result of this act, but it's not what Democrats had initially been hoping for, or some Democrats, I should say.
So the first, the sort of initial plan that Democrats had put forward to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices as well as cap out-of-pocket costs for people on Medicare would have saved the federal government $700 billion each decade. And that is a bill that I think, as The Intercept had done some great reporting on, something that Democrats have been campaigning on for a long time, is really popular, is a key part of their agenda. But the pharmaceutical industry has made this massive lobbying push. They spent $263 million in the last year, as well as, spending other money in donations to one of the groups you mentioned was Center Forward, a PAC that has been boosting Senator Sinema as well as others on the air, thanking them for their work on the infrastructure bill, but implicitly thanking them for blocking a drug pricing measure. So as you said, the Democrats do have a much watered down version of that legislation in Build Back Better, but it would apply to fewer drugs. It would reduce the amount that the government can negotiate drug prices, and it would shield newly developed drugs from having their prices negotiated. So the Democrats are delivering a small amount on this promise, but what they had initially planned for was much bigger.
Yeah. So, Julia, in your research and looking at this lobbying campaign, what sort of campaign was this? Was this to prop up Democrats? Was this donating to their campaigns? Also, like you said, running ads to benefit Democrats, or was this also a combination of going against Democrats, running campaigns and advertisements against them? I mean, I'm just kind of trying to get a gauge of where are they dropping the dollars, and are they propping up a lot of Republicans as well? I mean, how is this kind of spread out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, there's this group that we had mentioned earlier. It's the Pharmaceutical and Research Manufacturers of America, and that is a trade association. So basically, the way it works is a bunch of companies pay membership dues, and that raises a bunch of money for them. And they raised $573 million in 2020, which is sort of an inordinate sum of money. And if you look through that tax return, a lot of the money is going to campaigns, but as well as to these pretty deceptive ads that are running. And I think it's important to note that those ads, so for example, the ads that are boosting cinema, the money that was funneled through Center Forward to boost cinema, aren't saying, thank you, Senator Sinema, for watering down the drug pricing bill. What instead they're saying is, oh, she's, doing a very good job in Washington. She's working across the aisle. She's sticking to her values. So it's a lot of things that are sort of implicitly saying, we like these people, but aren't exactly saying why. And then the lobbying is just sort of, traditional lobbying efforts. And some of the drug companies and insurance companies are lobbying directly as well. And, we don't have a great sense from lobbying records of exactly what the nature of that is. But you can imagine, their lobbyists are meeting with lawmakers and saying what they want.
Do you think those ads are working? I mean, Sinema is, I think she's increasingly very unpopular among Democrats, but maybe she makes up for that with popularity among Republicans, I think just because they like any sort of infighting on the other side, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how people are responding to the ads, I don't have a great sense of that. What I will say is, there's a lot of sort of speculation about why Sinema does the things she does, or why would the Democrats sort of water down their own signature legislation. And I don't think you have to look very hard to see the money flowing in one direction and see the bill that came out on the other side, and see that the efforts on the whole have been very successful, sort of regardless of what elements of their lobbying campaign were influencing people, or how these advertisements, were reaching potential voters.
Well, Julia, we really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Stick around for more Rising right after this.